T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. All three engines up and burning. 2, 1, 0, and liftoff.
Coach on Fire Radio.
Moon, moon on the water, I've been taken for your doctor. Moon, moon on the water, lay me down upon your altar.
Thank you, Rachel Hamer, for that piece of music. Go to rachelhamer.com/music to get more information about her. You are tuned into Sacred Erotic with Gila and Nehemiah, and we have a special guest for you today. It's Lloyd Burnett. I'd actually ask him to give us his bio so you guys can learn more about him.
Perfect. Hello, everybody. So I'm Lloyd Burnett, and I'm honored to be here with you and with your community. And I am a coach, life coach, business coach, a guide on the sacred journey of harnessing the power of our fear, interrupting patterns of self-sabotage, of lack and struggle, and experiencing / creating more abundance, more fulfillment, more love, more of everything. Yes, please, universe. So that's kind of what I do.
Yes, I have to say, I try to bring people on who I've interacted with, and I took Lloyd's course, and it was just totally amazing. If you can maybe tell us more about this parts course that you created.
Yes. So I have a couple different courses. I think the one that you did was it Manifestation for Entrepreneurs or Awake Manifestation?
Awake Manifestation.
Awake Manifestation. So yeah, I have a couple different courses. Some are geared towards entrepreneurs with soul, and the others are geared toward people who have a lot of soul but may not be an entrepreneur, but they're both interchangeable, to tell you the truth. And what I do is I support people in finding the parts of them that are keeping them from standing in the fullness of their power and attracting the fullness of their heart's desire. So they may have parts that are unconsciously manifesting and attracting lack, struggle, situations that cause a lot of pain and suffering. So what we do is we go in and find those parts and support those parts in interrupting those patterns so that more space can open up to welcome the things that you want to attract, like abundance, more clients, more love, more success, more pleasure, more happiness, more enjoyment, whatever it is. So it's all kind of powered by the core engine of something that I can't say I call it parts work, because I think a lot of people call it parts work. And it's based off of internal family systems, a therapeutic modality. And it's all about finding the different parts of us that have control over different aspects, subconscious beliefs, behaviors, thought patterns in our experience.
You've put quite a lot into that answer. So let's see if we can break that apart for our viewers. I mean, you do this every day, so you really understand what that is. But all of our viewers, our listeners, may not really get all of that. So let's. I'm going to try to
break it down.
And maybe we can have another podcast another time. But we'll focus now on how to harness the power of fear to intensify your power to attract more abundance. I just want to say that I think I can just speak for myself, because I don't, I can't speak for my listeners, but I know that I have various, varying degrees of fear in my life. It's earlier in my life, maybe more, whatever it is, I've had different levels of fear. And especially as an entrepreneur, I think fear really comes into the game, at a point, especially financially, I think at least for me, at one point where I wasn't making money and I didn't know how to make money, I had all this fear around money, so even if we just talk about that as a concrete example to kind of give people, instead of the theoretical, to really focus on, like, okay, let's say I have a fear now of how am I going to really create the clientele that I desire to bring in my abundance. I know they're there. but I'm not sure how to do that, and I have some fear around it. How would I do that? What is your what kind of methodology would I use to try to help myself to get out of it?
Yeah, beautiful question. Beautiful question. So there are a couple different avenues. And what I typically do is split this up into the external work and the internal work. And it depends on the person what comes first. So the internal work is finding the parts of you that are blocking what it is that you want to attract and you want to achieve. So finding the parts of you that learn the stories that you're not good enough, you're not worthy enough, you can't ask for these prices in your business because people are going to reject you, they're going to think that you're not a good healer, or blah, blah, blah. All of the stories that we have. So we find those parts of us. And we begin to really question and investigate where these thought patterns, where they were born, where they were birthed. And we begin to hold space for that story and all of the emotions that are around that story. Because once you start investigating the thought that I'm not worthy of having clients, you'll start to see images and things that happen, traumas that happened in the past that led you to believe that thought. And around that story and those images, those memories, those traumas is a lot of energy that has been pent up. And so you start to feel it in your body, tears, anger, tension, sadness, whatever it is. And you begin to say yes to that. And you allow that energy to be expressed, because all energy wants to do is to be felt and expressed. And as you begin to express that energy releases and it makes the space for new energy. And so this internal work creates space. And so once the internal work creates that space, you have a space to fill it with something new. And so you can begin doing the external work. And it's interesting, I was just working with an entrepreneur yesterday who is in a similar position than what you just described, where they're trying to attract the abundance. And so we started doing the internal work, and I stopped her and I was like, okay, how much abundance did you ask for this week? It's like, well, I didn't directly ask for anything yet. And I was like, okay, well, what offers do you have in your business? Well, I have this 3-month program, this 6-month program. How many times did you offer that this week? Well, I kind of alluded to the offer once or twice. I'm like, okay, so you're saying that you want to have $4,000 a month coming in. So that means that you need to ask for at least $30,000 a month. And so every week you need to talk to X amount of people and ask for X amount of dollars to be able to make it to that $4,000 a month. And so once we started working with this external work of, okay, I need to find people to pitch an offer to ask for abundance, more internal work started coming up. Okay, can I really ask for this price? Where am I going to find these people? How am I going to find 4 or 5 people to work with each week to ask for a total of $30,000? Can I really ask for $30,000? So the external work starts to trigger more internal work. So you do the internal work again around the stories. Once that energy is cleared, there's more of a space to ask people for the abundance that you want. So there's the internal work of working with the parts of you that are afraid that you're not worthy of whatever, are afraid of asking. And there's the external work of following, there's tried and tested formulas that work for pretty much anybody to ask people for abundance and have them say yes. And so once you do that internal work, you can start doing the external work, and you tweak the external work with more internal work so that you begin hearing the yeses. That's a long answer with a lot of unpacked once again, but I like to talk. So,
well, this is kind of interesting, because I do this work around sacred erotica, and I've been talking to my list recently about about this type of topic. You know, I just, I'll kind of give an analogy for our listeners. So I think that when we're with any kind of partner, no matter if it's a long-term partner or short-term, doesn't really matter. But I think the issue that some people may face, and this goes, I think, for men and women, is what you talked about. There's an internal fear of possibly, like, let's say you want to do something that you may think is, you know, everyone has fantasies, and they may want to share it with someone who they've known for a little while or for a long time. Doesn't really matter. But to share that fantasy might be scary because of these, you know, tapes, these old programming of I'm not good enough. Maybe they're not going to like me. Maybe they're going to judge my fantasy. And then, but when you start asking, and when you're not really attached to the answer, then you ask anybody. You know, I mean, as long as you feel comfortable, obviously. You know, as long as you get along in that way, you can start asking, and then it becomes less scary because it doesn't really matter if they say yes or no. It only matters when they say yes, and then you can decide if you want to do it or not. How does that fit your description?
Oh, it fits perfectly. It fits perfectly because you have to create the space within you to ask first. And when you create that space by doing your healing work, it doesn't mean that the external work is going to be all easy. And like, I'll be able to just show up and be vulnerable and authentic and ask for somebody to, you know, tie me up and do, you know, be dominant in the sexual experience. You know, it doesn't mean that it's going to be easy to ask for that, but there's more of a space to ask for it. And so in that space, you have a choice point where you can actually act on the ask. You can ask. And what that ask, I love how people tend to believe that, like, you know, once I do this internal work, I'm going to be in this like paradise where everything's going to be easy. But I can almost guarantee, and I don't like to guarantee things, but I can almost guarantee that once you ask, new parts are going to be triggered that are going to require more internal work. It's going to be like, oh my God, they said yes. And so you have to do that work. Oh my God, they said no. So you have to do that work. So the internal work creates a space for the external work to happen. The external work pulls the layer back of the onion so that more internal work can be revealed. So they kind of go hand in hand and feed off of each other.
Right. I think that's a really good point, you know, and I think especially when it's two partners that know each other well, I think there's a lot of room to grow. But sometimes when, you know, because they understand each other, they might feel each other, you know, their emotions may not necessarily, you know, have to be point blank communicated, but they know how to interact. And I think when there can be, if anyone's thinking about like maybe multiple partners, then it gets a little bit more complicated because then there's a lot more communication that needs to occur. And if people are not, you know, all cognizant of that, then there could be, and I think it's really right in there with the internal and the external, because, you know, once you work out with your main partner how things are going, that's cool. But once you maybe want to move into something a little wider range, exactly, then there are more parts that are moving.
Exactly. There's more containers. It's like you not only have the internal within you parts to work with, but you have the internal within the primary relationship. And then you have the external within the other relationships. And so there's a lot more moving parts, but it still follows the same flow of working inside and then outside and then going back inside. And yeah, it still follows the same flow.
Right. And I think it actually works in any situation. Like even if, let's say, you know, a person who's even a married couple with their children and a new child comes in, you know, it's the same thing. Or a divorced woman or man who has a new partner and introducing to their children. It's kind of all the same thing. You know, I mean, I'm just having that realization right now, but I mean, that's just really amazing that work can be put into any situation. So this, you know, anyone who's listening now, I mean, I really would, Lloyd's going to talk a little bit later about his free gifts, but, you know, wow, what kind of personal development you can do by doing this work with Lloyd, or, to really discover your parts and see how it could actually be expressed in different